I'm the one he loves. You need to disappear. I'm the one who deserves to be John's wife. John is shamelessly having an affair while I'm 9 months pregnant. I wanted to settle this thing, so I came to their date spot. But my thought was foolish. I thought I could be strong because I had a baby to protect, but my reckless actions put my baby in danger. As the woman walked past me, a sharp pain shot through my lower abdomen. Her fist had driven into my stomach. It happened in a split second as we passed each other. I fell hard on my backside without being able to break my fall. I felt a warm sensation in my lower body. Warm fluid slowly spread. I was so stunned and in pain that I couldn't even scream. Maybe your baby go to heaven because of you. It's punishment for using your child to keep your place as his wife. Poor thing. Her voice was cheerful. John sighed and started to speak awkwardly.
That woman isn't my wife.
She's the only one who doesn't know about John's madness yet. I'm Laura, 28 years old. Right now, I'm expecting a precious baby. I married my husband, John, a year ago after a passionate romance. Our reunion started by chance at a work meeting. Although it was supposed to be our first meeting, he seemed familiar to me for some reason. John stared at my face intently as well. Could it be John?
Laura? Is that you, Laura? Yes, it's me, John.
For a moment, we forgot we were at work, grabbed each other's hands, and started jumping up and down. I remember that John transferred to our school in 3rd grade and then transferred again to another school in 4th grade. We only spent 1 year together, but his kind and gentle nature made him very popular among the girls. At that time, most of the boys were still quite childish, so John seemed very mature. I think almost all the girls in our class had a crush on John. I was one of them. The John I admired back then has appeared before me, now an even more wonderful adult.
It's amazing that such coincidences happen. No, it's fate. We were torn apart as kids, but it was destined that we would meet again someday.
John is always a gentleman. He gently holds my hand and escorts me. He proposed on the observation deck of a high-rise tower overlooking the city lights. He slowly knelt down.
Will you marry me? Laura, I love you with all my heart.
The ring he offered was shining beautifully. The answer was, of course, yes. He placed the diamond ring on my left ring finger.
Laura, you are more beautiful than the night view or this jewel. You are my precious treasure. I will make you happy.
The people around us applauded generously. The romantic proposal was a bit embarrassing, but the joy outweighed it. John works hard and always gives me a bouquet of roses on our anniversaries. When I do the housework, he always expresses his gratitude. He's such a kind husband. And then, about 6 months into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant.
Congratulations. Oh, our baby is in there?
When I told John about my pregnancy, he teared up with joy and gently stroked my belly. I could feel his love through his warm hands.
If it's our child, they're sure to be adorable.
Already a doting parent?
That's not fair. I'm being serious. I want our daughter to be a princess, graceful and full of poise.
Hearing John's thoughts, I realized why he always treated me so kindly. He always treats me like a princess. It felt a little ticklish, but I didn't mind it. So, if it's a boy, he'll be a prince?
That's not going to happen.
Even though John acts like a prince himself, why does he laugh and deny it? Maybe he doesn't realize he acts like a prince. If it's a girl, she'll be a princess. If it's a boy, he'll be a prince. Either way, they'll be kind and wonderful. I was filled with happiness. The rift between John and me started a few months later.
What? A prince?
When I found out the baby's gender, I immediately told John.
A prince? Meaning a boy? No way. Why?
Even if he asked why, we can't choose the baby's gender. John looked at my belly with a deeply disappointed expression. Didn't you want a boy? I asked, protecting my belly.
Of course not. Boys are rough, dumb, and what's good about them? Tell me one good thing about raising a boy.
It was the first time I learned how John felt, and I was just stunned. But it didn't stop there. John said something he should never have said.
Go get an abortion soon.
He said it with his usual gentle smile, and I was shocked. Wait, why? How can you say something so horrible? It's your baby. John's reply was terrifying.
Yeah, it's my baby, so I can decide to abort the pregnancy, right?
He wasn't joking, he was serious. John gently held my hand as I lost all color in my face.
I know. Abortion is hard on a woman's body. It's scary, right? Let's take care of it while the baby is still as small as possible. I'm worried about your health, Laura.
Is he gentle? He's kind to me, but he has absolutely no love for our unborn child.
It'll be okay. Next time, let's make sure it's a girl.
John patted my head, and I instinctively pushed his hand away. No, I'm having this my baby. Just because it's a boy doesn't mean its life can be taken lightly. I thought my feelings were completely natural, but John looked utterly incredulous. Since then, John has been ignoring me. Of course, I didn't have an abortion and my belly began to plump. Good morning, John. I didn't want to ignore him too. I kept greeting John, who blatantly avoided me. It was as if John had an allergy to baby boys. When I got close, he would scratch his arms and neck furiously. Hey, John, the baby is moving inside me. Do you want to feel it? John glanced at me and muttered.
I don't care.
He's originally a kind person. Once the baby is born, he'll be so charmed by how adorable it is. He's just being stubborn because it's not the gender he hoped for. It's just a matter of patience until the baby is born. However, I soon realized that repairing our relationship was already impossible. One day, I received a message on my phone. Disappear? It was a single message from an unknown account. A prank? Or maybe a mistake? At first, I thought lightly of it, but the messages kept coming. Nuisance? Last time it was garbage woman. What is this? It's scary. I wanted to reply to find out who it was, but it might not just be a prank. There was a risk of getting involved in a malicious scam. I had seen on TV before that you should ignore suspicious emails. They said not to respond to phone calls or messages that made you anxious. So I thought if I ignored these messages, they would eventually stop. But ignoring them seemed to have the opposite effect. Another message from the usual person. What? I reluctantly checked the message and my eyes widened in surprise. This time, there was a photo attached for the first time. John? And who's this? It was a picture of John and an unknown woman, smiling with their cheeks touching. The message that followed was terrifying. Laura, How long do you intend to ignore repeated warnings and stay there? My name was written in the message. How does this person know my name? It was clear that this wasn't a prank or a mistake, but a message directed specifically at me. They want me gone, and a photo with John. Does this mean he's cheating? I couldn't believe that kind-hearted John would do such a thing, but the situation made me suspicious. The message was overly polite, but filled with strong malice. Recently, John had indeed been cold towards me. Is he cheating because the baby is a boy? I can't accept that reason. No, that can't be right. John treasures me too much to betray me. I said out loud to convince myself. It's probably the work of an ex-girlfriend. It's not unusual for an ex to have friendly photos. She's desperately trying to get the kind John back from me. John would never betray me. For some reason, I completely trusted him. So, I decided to consult John when he got home from work. Hey, John, I want you to look at this picture. John, still maintaining his distant attitude, looked uninterested as I spoke. He glanced at the screen of the phone I held out. At that moment, John's eyebrow twitched. What do you think? Do you know this person? I was genuinely just seeking advice. He's being stubborn right now, but deep down, he must think I'm the most important person in the world. Once he knows I'm in trouble, he'll surely protect me like a man. Then, John ran his hand through his hair and let out a deep sigh.
So, this is the kind of woman you are.
For some reason, he looked at me with contempt, and my body froze. I couldn't understand what he meant.
If you think about it, this is your fault. What kind of wife does things that her husband hates, and then to blame me, who's been putting up with it? What kind of nerve do you have?
John's attitude went beyond mere stubbornness or coldness. It was filled with a sense of resignation and disappointment. I couldn't understand why he was suddenly so angry.
I married the wrong person.
John left the house, his footsteps loud and heavy. I sat down on the floor of the empty room. Why? The woman in the photo might not be an ex-girlfriend, but his current one. Finally, I had to admit that John was betraying me. I just wanted to talk to John about the suspicious messages, but he must have misunderstood and thought I was accusing him of cheating, making him furious. We met again by fate and fell deeply in love, getting married. This wasn't supposed to happen. As I stroked my belly, which was moving energetically, I wondered where our happiness had broken. I couldn't even wipe away the tears that flowed naturally. My mind was a mess of past joys and future anxieties, leaving me unable to think clearly. Since then, John has been even more irritable. He completely ignored me. When I tried to talk to him, he didn't respond, and if I got close, he would click his tongue and move away. He seemed to have no desire to discuss anything. John's attitude made me increasingly anxious. My emotions changed almost every day, such as crying, anxiety, and irritation. I couldn't control my emotions. But when I received a certain letter, that instability disappeared. I was going to have a baby and become a mother. At 9 months pregnant, with the birth imminent, my sense of motherhood became clear. I resolved that there was no time to cry or worry anymore. And today, I was going to settle everything. I came to the local flower park. The seasonal flowers were bathed in the orange glow of the sunset. When I took a deep breath, the sweet scent of the flowers filled my chest. But I wasn't there to be healed. I was there to find John and a certain woman at the end of the beautiful flower corridor. They didn't notice I was just 5 meters behind them. They were enjoying a romantic moment, close to each other. As the sun set and the lights came on, they would enjoy an even sweeter, happier time. I remembered the proposal against the night skyline. I had my moments of happiness, but I no longer had any regrets. I steeled myself and approached John, who was lost in their world. John.
What? Oh, Laura.
I expected him to be more flustered, but John just frowned. He didn't even try to shake off the woman clinging to his arm. The woman looked up at John with a slightly worried expression.
What?
A man and woman arm in arm, having a lovely date in a flower garden. In this situation, there's no way he can pass her off as just a friend. But a part of me didn't want John to make pathetic excuses about it being a misunderstanding.
Why? Why are you here?
John just muttered complaints. John, who is this woman? He didn't answer my question. So you were cheating. Even when caught red-handed, John continued to ignore me. The baby is due soon, and you're being this irresponsible as a father? Like a rebellious teenager, he turned his gaze away with an annoyed expression. Instead, the woman spoke up. Poor John. She hugged his arm tightly as if to protect him. Then John stepped forward in silence. She walked along with him, still clinging to his arm. Wait, we still need to talk. I wanted to settle things, and I might have been a bit impatient. I stepped in front of John and the woman. But John avoided me as if I were a bothersome utility pole. Then the woman walked past me. She smiled brightly. Her sticky smile filled me with fear, and I got goosebumps all over my body. The next moment, I felt a strong impact on my lower abdomen. I looked down to see the woman's fist buried in my belly. It happened in a split second as we passed each other. I fell backward. My mind was filled with the need to protect my baby, but I couldn't move my hands and fell hard on my backside. It hurts. Why? Even John stopped in his tracks. The woman looked down at me with a concerned expression, but her words were cruel. Oh, a pregnant woman fell. How ugly. She squatted down and spoke clearly to me. I'm the one he loves. You need to disappear. I'm the one who deserves to be John's wife. But my thought was foolish. I thought I could be strong because I had a baby to protect, but my reckless actions put my baby in danger. Suddenly, I felt a warm sensation in my lower body. I felt warm fluid slowly spreading. This is bad. Did my water break? Is the baby okay? My mind was in a panic, but the pain and shock rendered me speechless. Right after her horrifying words, the woman smiled, tilted her head, and looked into my face. Are you okay? It's dangerous for a pregnant woman to fall. What? Does it hurt? Maybe your baby go to heaven because of you. It's punishment for using your child to keep your place as his wife. Poor thing. Her voice was cheerful. She pretended to be concerned, but didn't offer a hand to help me as I lay there in pain. John sighed and awkwardly began to speak.
That woman isn't my wife.
What? People started to gather, and it became a small commotion. Someone must have called an ambulance, and I was quickly taken to my obstetrician. I was worried about my baby, but an emergency operation was performed as soon as I arrived at the hospital, and I gave birth safely. Fortunately, it was only about a week before the due date, so the baby's birth weight was fine. Though in the intensive care unit as a precaution, my baby seemed healthy. Now, let's continue settling this. 3 days after giving birth, John reluctantly showed up at my hospital room after I called for him. That woman was also with him. She looked around the hospital room and her eyes bluntly turned to my stomach, which was sitting on the bed.
Oh, your belly is flat. Did the baby go to heaven?
I had grown accustomed to her outrageous comments delivered with a sweet smile. She seemed more lively and confident than before. The woman introduced herself as Ashley.
Oh, you had the baby normally? Congratulations on your birth. It's good to have a baby around so you don't get lonely, right?
Unlike the silent John, Ashley kept talking nonstop. Despite it being a hospital and me just having given birth, she seemed oblivious to the situation.
I heard the baby is a boy from John. Isn't that nice, a little boyfriend? You won't end up a lonely old lady, you know?
Ashley was probably in her early 20s, not much younger than me.
Well, if it were me, I'd prefer a regular boyfriend over a little one. But you can settle for your little boyfriend.
Ashley grinned even wider. Her lips were moving restlessly, as if she couldn't wait to spill a secret.
I feel really bad for you, but
She hesitated, drawing out the suspense. I waited expressionlessly for her next words.
actually, you're not John's wife anymore. You guys are divorced.
When she said this, her face flushed with excitement and her legs fluttered. Yeah, I know.
Oh, really?
Her annoying dance of joy stopped abruptly. I know, John and I are divorced. For the first time, John's face, which had been indifferent until now, turned serious.
Why?
He asked in a small voice, and I calmly replied, because I received the divorce notification.
What?
About a month ago, I received a letter addressed to me. When I opened it, it was a notice that the divorce had been finalized. I was confused, thinking it might be a scam. But when I inquired, it turned out to be true. Apparently, John had submitted the divorce papers without telling me.
So you knew? You knew and still pretended to be his wife? That's pathetic. It's actually kind of scary. Since your relationship is clearly over, you should let John go.
John must have taken this drastic measure because he wanted to marry Ashley. Ashley, knowing this, seemed thrilled to be the one he loved most. The scary one here isn't me, it's John. When I glared at John, he bit his lip and looked down. I never signed any divorce papers. Did you sign them, John? Still no response. I hated being yelled at, but being ignored was just as infuriating. So, John, you forged them? Then the divorce is invalid.
What do you mean?
Ashley pouted, her cheeks puffing up. It's obvious. A divorce filed without my consent is invalid. If I make the proper appeal, it will be annulled.
You're such a horrible woman. John doesn't love you anymore. So why are you clinging to him?
He's still the father of my child. He needs to take responsibility. Ashley looked at me with contempt, as if I were something disgusting, and hugged herself, trembling.
No way, that's really scary. John was troubled because he couldn't divorce you easily because of the baby. And didn't he ask you to get an abortion, but you stubbornly refused? That's so selfish. That's why John had no choice but to file for divorce. Poor John.
It's me who is truly pitiful, being divorced without my knowledge right before giving birth. Fine, I'll go through with the divorce. Since I already knew about the divorce beforehand, I had come to terms with it. Ashley's face brightened. John's tense shoulders relaxed. Ashley grabbed John's hand and started skipping around.
We did it, John. We won. True love has won. Now we can be happy. I love you, John.
Oh, yeah.
John, being spun around forcibly, wore a bitter smile. But this is a hospital. Even though it's a private room, it's noisy, and more than anything, it's nauseating. I'm sorry to bother you when you two get excited. When I spoke up, Ashley stopped skipping. Her eyes sparkled like a little girl's. Let's see how long that sparkle lasts. Take a look at these. I spread several photos on the table.
Oh,
What? What are these?
All of them were pictures of John and Ashley together. Some of them were quite risque, with no clothes on. John quickly gathered the photos.
These pictures. Why did you take them secretly?
How could I have taken secret pictures when you're looking at the camera? I have all the evidence of your affair, so you'll be paying alimony.
Alimony? You greedy woman.
It's my rightful claim.
These are private photos. How did you get them? This is invasion of privacy or maybe even fabrication. This won't count as evidence of my affair.
I thought John was a serious person, but he turned out to be dishonest. Did he really think he could get away with a divorce and an affair without paying alimony? They're not fabricated. You two started dating 5 months ago. You met through a dating app. Several photos slipped from John's hands. His hands were trembling and his face had turned pale. Ashley told me everything. Isn't that right? Now, Ashley fell silent and looked down. John threw the photos aside and shook Ashley's shoulders roughly.
Why? Why did you say all that? And how are you even connected to Laura?
In reality, I turned the tables on Ashley, who had been sending me those messages. She pressured me to divorce John, so I played the obedient wife, insisting John would never cheat. If he loves you more than me, do you have any proof? When I tearfully pleaded, she eagerly provided the evidence. Ashley told me everything, how you met, your sweet dates, and even all the nasty things you said about me. She also sent me these indecent photos.
Damn it.
John muttered under his breath and tore up the photos in his hands.
Why? Laura is so quiet. I thought she would fold if I pressured her. Without solid proof of the affair, she would have had no choice but to accept it. But now, thanks to Ashley, everything's ruined.
Ashley, who had been silent, bit her lips so hard that a vivid red slowly oozed out. Finally, she snapped back at the suddenly furious John.
well, it's your fault, John. You kept telling me you loved me, but you wouldn't leave Laura. You kept feeling sorry for her because she was pregnant and kept hesitating. So, I took it upon myself to tell her to divorce you.
Just 3 minutes ago, they were holding hands and skipping, but now they were red-faced and spitting venom at each other.
I did divorce her, but dumping her while she's pregnant looks bad. So, I secretly divorced her and was planning to surprise you. We're already married.
What?
Ashley gasped.
After filing the divorce papers with Laura, I also filed our marriage certificate. I love you, Ashley. Are you happy now?
John,
Tears welled up in Ashley's eyes.
I love you, John.
Ashley threw herself into John's chest. It's strange that Ashley is moved by a man who would secretly file divorce papers and then submit a marriage certificate without consent. A normal person wouldn't appreciate such a surprise. Unable to keep up with the roller coaster of love and hatred unfolding before me, I buried my head in my hands. It was embarrassing to realize that this absurd man had been my husband. Just then, there was a knock on the hospital room door. It seemed like they had arrived. "I'm sorry to interrupt you again." Ashley, who seemed to be in heaven, and John, who seemed to be uncomfortable, looked at me. "Ashley, someone's here for you.
What?
Come in." At my prompting, police officers entered the room.
What? Police? Having an affair isn't a crime.
I informed the panicking Ashley. "Have you forgotten what you did? You punched me in the stomach and knocked me down, remember?"
I don't know what you're talking about.
There was a noticeable pause before her denial. She might have thought it was just a little shove. But since it escalated to the point where an ambulance had to be called, she must have realized it was serious. "Luckily, my baby is safe, but I won't forgive what you did."
I don't know anything about that.
Ashley was trying to play innocent. It seemed they needed clear evidence. "Watch this video." I played a video on my phone that had been recorded at the flower park that day. A witness who was there had provided it. The main focus was the beautiful flowers, but in the background, you could see me, Ashley, and John. "Look, here you are hitting my stomach. Do you still want to say you don't know anything about it?"
Why?
Ashley, too frustrated to resist, was led away by the police, looking regretful. John, visibly relieved, let out a sigh. His harsh expression softened, and he gave me a sheepish smile.
I'm really sorry.
He blatantly tried to smooth things over and reached for my hand.
It was just a mistake. It's just that, Laura, you wouldn't listen to me.
He cheated because I didn't follow his command to abort the baby boy. I understood, but it wasn't a reason I could accept.
Ashley seemed so sweet and gentle when we started dating, but you saw her true colors, right? Thanks for showing me. In the end, you're the only one I love, Laura. I was deceived.
John shrugged wearily. Really? I guess I was deceived too.
What?
I thought you were a romantic prince, but you're just a selfish cheater. John, who was about to put on a reconciliatory face to ask me to take him back, twitched his cheek. Just then, a police officer tapped him on the shoulder.
Are you ready to go?
What?
The police officer had been waiting patiently, giving us time to talk.
We also need to hear your side of the story.
John jumped and frantically shook his head.
I didn't hit anyone. I didn't do anything. That crazy woman did it all on her own.
John's just as crazy. It's not about the assault. It's about filing the divorce papers without my consent. That's a crime.
Huh? Is that one?
The calm-faced police officer took hold of John's arm. John began to panic.
But we're getting divorced, right? So it's fine. Or wait, we're not divorcing, are we? Let's start over. Let's get married again. That should be okay. We'll just forget about the divorce.
No way. I'm not marrying you again. And even if I wanted to, I couldn't. You secretly married Ashley without her consent too.
Oh my God.
John couldn't resist the police. He hung his head as he was led away, and peace returned to the hospital room. The idea of getting back together was out of the question. He didn't even ask about the baby from beginning to end, proving he's unfit to be a father. Later, neither John nor Ashley faced serious charges and were given probation, but they faced significant social repercussions. John got fired from his job. He claimed it was wrongful termination, but he had been covering up his mistakes, and the company seized the opportunity to let him go. He seemed like a good person on the surface, but often left things unresolved, causing big problems later. Since he worked with one of our clients, I got this information. I wish I had known about his reputation before getting married. Meanwhile, Ashley paid me a substantial settlement to lessen her charges. The money came from her parents. She cried to them for help, but it ended with them cutting ties with her. As a result, she has been clinging to the only person she can rely on, John. One day, I saw Ashley and John in a thrift store.
This suits me perfectly.
Ashley held up a used designer dress in front of the mirror and smiled creepily. Nearby, John, looking lifeless, was hunched over.
You bought a necklace just last week. Stop buying stuff. We don't have money. Please, give me a break.
But I'm a princess, right? John, you made me a princess, so why say something so sad?
Realizing it was best to avoid them, I quietly left the store. I had already received alimony and child support from John in a lump sum while he still had savings. I didn't expect him to lose his job and be stuck with Ashley, but it was a good decision to get everything at once. I returned to my parents' house with my son and led a peaceful life. However, an unexpected incident occurred suddenly.
Thief!
My mom's shrill voice pierced the midnight silence. My dad and I rushed over and saw two figures in the dark.
Who are you? Get out.
I clung to my mom in fear.
Give us the money.
The figures moved erratically before making their demands. I recognized the voice immediately. Don?
No, that's not.
The panicked voice was unmistakably John's, which meant the other figure had to be Ashley. Realizing his identity had been discovered, John panicked even more and inexplicably charged at me.
I know you have money. Hand over the money you squeezed out of your poor ex-husband.
My dad managed to tackle John as he lunged at me. Meanwhile, we called the police. The police arrived quickly and apprehended John and Ashley without much trouble.
I just wanted to get my money back.
Give me back my money. You're the thieves.
Even as they were being shoved into the patrol car, they continued to yell. The midnight commotion woke the entire neighborhood, and a crowd gathered around our house. Dad, are you okay? Dawn had fought like a wild animal, leaving my dad with several injuries. John and Ashley, who tried to break into my parents' house out of spite to get the money back, were arrested again.
They've caused injuries, so this is robbery.
Their probation will be revoked, and they'll face actual prison time. Truly foolish people. Whether they became unhinged because of the affair or their unhinged nature led them to cheat, I don't know, but it's terrifying that a small mistake like infidelity could escalate to robbery. I was relieved to be rid of such a troubled person. While their infidelity and selfish actions shocked me, it was probably a blessing to have seen their true colors early on. I was fortunate that my child was a boy. Time flies, and my son is already 4 years old. Recently, he's been obsessed with playing pretend battles. My dad is always the villain, and I am the princess.
See? I did it.
With a toy sword at his waist, my son proudly plays the hero. Then he extends his hand to me.
Here, princess, I've come to save you.
This adorable young boy is my true prince. I'll raise him with love and care, ensuring he doesn't grow up to be a misguided prince like John.
My name is Kathy Brown. I'm 42 years old. I'm a stay-at-home mom with a husband of the same age and a daughter in 9th grade. My husband, Tim, and I were co-workers at the same company right after college. We got married when I was 27, and I became a stay-at-home mom. I actually wanted to continue working, but Tim begged me to stay home. Then our daughter, Samantha, was born, and I became busy with my first experience of parenting and housework. From that time, Tim's behavior started to change. After Samantha was born, I noticed that he looked down on people he considered inferior to him. He always made comments to me, even when I hadn't slept at all due to our baby's nighttime crying, about how I was a stay-at-home mom with no income.
Must be good to be a carefree housewife.
Moreover, he would sometimes be cold towards our daughter. When she was in kindergarten, she occasionally made predictions that came true. For example, on our way back from the store, she insisted,
I want to go home this way today.
Sure enough, there was a traffic accident on our usual route at that time. Over time, Tim started to find her unsettling. As Samantha grew, her strange predictions stopped, but Tim still didn't engage with her and now hardly speaks to her. Instead, he started blaming me.
Samantha is so sullen because of you.
Tim started blaming everything he disliked on me. Of course, I've thought about getting our divorce, but I'm holding on until Samantha graduates from college. One Saturday, Samantha was out all day for her club activities, and Tim was also out, so I was engrossed in my hobby of making jewelry. I've always liked doing detailed work. It's a stress reliever for me. I heard someone come home and saw Tim open the living room door. He looked pleased but sneered when he saw the half-finished jewelry.
Don't tell me you've been wasting time on that until I got home. What about the housework? There's plenty to do like laundry and cleaning.
I did the waterworks and weeded the garden today. Tim, who is often away, didn't notice the change.
You slack on housework and make useless things you won't even use. What exactly can you do? Because you're so lazy and unproductive, Samantha is so gloomy.
Gloomy? What is he talking about? Isn't it because he doesn't try to engage with her? Samantha talks a lot about her day to me.
You and Samantha can't live without my earnings. Respect me more. If you don't like it, try earning as much as I do. Then we'll be on equal footing.
Tim, arms crossed and chin raised, looked down on me. I've had enough of this belittling life. As I was thinking that, Tim suddenly remembered something and said,
Oh, by the way, I don't need dinner tomorrow because I have a business dinner.
I couldn't believe my ears. Tomorrow is Samantha's basketball game, and Tim was supposed to go and cheer her on. I had convinced him to go despite his reluctance. Is he really going to break that promise?
I want to show Dad what I can do.
My daughter was so eager. She thought that if she performed well and showed her skills, her dad would take an interest in her. Maybe that's what she believed. But Tim doesn't notice her wish.
Of course, my business dinner is more important than a middle school game. This is why women who know nothing about work are so annoying.
I felt a sting in my nose. If I don't hold back, I might start crying. But if I cry now, he'll probably say, women think they can just cry their way out. I sniffled, trying to escape the brink of my tears. Just as Tim was about to leave the living room, he turned around and added,
By the way, I'm going on my business trip overseas next week. As you can see, I'm busy. But I guess someone as idle as you, making useless stuff, wouldn't understand.
He left with a sneer. The following week, he left for his business trip early in the morning. Not even a goodbye. I sighed, and shortly after, our daughter, Samantha, woke up, rubbing her sleepy eyes.
Has Dad already left?
He left about 30 minutes ago. Samantha then started making a phone call on her smartphone. Calling a friend?
No, it's Dad.
Surely, she wasn't calling just to say goodbye. Puzzled, I watched as she continued to call until Tim picked up. After about 10 rings, he finally picked up.
What is it, Samantha? I'm about to start work. Don't call me without a reason.
I could hear Tim's irritated voice from Samantha's phone. He seemed annoyed by the unexpected call. But Samantha ignored his grumpy tone and continued.
Dad, are you still at the airport?
Yes, I'm about to board. I'm hanging up now.
Good luck with your work. But
Samantha paused for a moment and then said something unbelievable.
is the woman you're traveling with your mistress? Be careful or you'll get fired.
Fired? I was so shocked by the unexpected word that my voice went high-pitched. And what did she mean by mistress?
What nonsense are you talking about? You've always been weird like this, haven't you?
I wondered if I was imagining things, but Tim's voice seemed a bit shaky. After Tim scolded Samantha with inappropriate comments, he abruptly ended the call. The sound of the disconnected call echoed strangely in the room. I was completely baffled and asked Samantha, "Are you half asleep?"
I'll talk to you about it when Dad gets back.
With that, she went back to her room. 3 days later, Tim returned from his trip. He walked into the house as if nothing had happened. I wanted to clarify what happened on the day he left, so I asked, "Hey, about that phone call the other day, what was that about?" Tim turned around with a mocking expression.
Do you really believe Samantha's silly talk? She's been saying weird things since she was little.
I was exasperated. That was true when she was in kindergarten. But now she's in middle school. She'll be in high school next year. It was clear how little attention my husband had paid to our daughter. I became furious and confronted him. Enough. You may not care, but Samantha is going to be a high schooler soon. No matter how poorly you've treated her, she wouldn't lie like that. I yelled at Tim. 16 years of marriage, and it was my first time fighting back. I didn't know I could raise my voice so loudly.
You, getting all high and mighty while I'm away on my business trip. Who do you think makes this life possible? Enough! Don't you dare talk back to me again.
Tim's face turned as red as a boiled lobster, and he grabbed my collar, raising his right hand high. He's going to hit me. Just as I shut my eyes tight, the doorbell rang.
Shit.
He lowered his right hand and let go of my clothes.
Go get it.
Okay. I'm saved. I patted my chest in relief and hurried to the monitor, where I saw Tim's boss, John. I knew this boss well since he had been very supportive of me when I worked at the company. He was the one who celebrated our marriage the most in the office. Why is he here suddenly? He's not the type to drop by unannounced. I pressed the button and greeted him. It's been a while. What brings you here? On the screen, John looked uneasy, shifting his body from side to side.
Oh, Kathy, long time no see. Sorry for the sudden visit, but is Tim at home?
Obviously, he had business with Tim. Normally, this could be handled by email or phone. Does it have to be in person?
Hey, what's taking so long? Who are you talking to?
Tim, annoyed by my long interaction, asked impatiently. John is here. For some reason, Tim's face went pale. His eyes darted in all directions, and he began trembling uncontrollably, completely losing his composure. The opposite of his previous attitude. I'll go ahead and let him in. As I headed towards the door, Tim hurriedly blocked my way.
Wait, the house is messy. I'll talk to them outside. You stay here.
What are you talking about? I just vacuumed. Didn't you notice? The only thing in the way was his suitcase from the overseas trip. We can't have a conversation standing outside. This is your important work contact. Even I, as a stay-at-home mom, understand that much. I spoke a bit sarcastically and tried to walk past him. But he grabbed my arm and dragged me into the living room, clearly not wanting me to meet his boss. Ouch! The force made me cry out. Just then, our daughter, Samantha, slipped past us and opened the front door. John, greeted by her, stepped inside and saw us struggling, his face turning red.
Tim, not only are you cheating, but you're also laying hands on your wife. What kind of man are you?
Cheating? Did he just say cheating? John's words made me think that Samantha's words might be true. But how did John know about Tim's affair? Tim just got back today and hasn't even been to the office yet. I didn't need to ask, as John yelled the explanation at him.
How do you explain making a move on my daughter?
I see, that's what it was. I glanced at Tim, who was sweating profusely and shaking his head desperately.
Misunderstanding? Who told you that?
He was denying it fervently, but his expression and behavior clearly showed he was lying. It's obvious.
Are you going to play dumb? Then what is this photo?
John pulled out his smartphone from his chest pocket and thrust a photo towards us. In the photo, Tim was snuggled up close with a young woman. This was definitive proof. There was no more room for excuses. I felt strangely detached, as if this were someone else's problem.
Do you still insist you didn't do it?
Tim glared at the photo, his face contorted as if he had bitten into something sour. He stared fixedly, probably desperately trying to come up with an excuse. John explained the situation so that even I could understand.
My daughter and Tim have been having an affair for 2 years. This so-called business trip was a lie. They actually went to a resort hotel outside the county together.
The idea of a 43-year-old trying to avoid detection by staying in the room made my skin crawl. I got goosebumps. I remembered that when I worked at the company, John's daughter was in elementary school. If my memory serves me right, she should now be in her early 20s. As I started thinking, I felt an overwhelming sense of disgust toward Tim. I couldn't stop shivering. Unconsciously, I rubbed my left arm. John continued.
The whole company is gossiping about it. Aren't you ashamed? Hitting on a girl nearly 20 years younger. I've been deceived by you for 2 years.
Well, how did you find out about their affair this time?
Oh, my daughter had a private social media account that only a few people could see. She posted pictures of her dates and gifts from Tim there. Here, look.
John manipulated his smartphone and showed me the screen. There were photos from high-end restaurants, numerous gifts, and even long poetic posts about her feelings for Tim. So this is what he was doing during all those outings. I quickly turned to look at Tim. He had his lips tightly sealed and was looking down. Had he given up resisting the overwhelming evidence?
On the day of the trip, my daughter, while drunk in the room with Tim, accidentally posted a photo to her public account, which is followed by company people, instead of her private one.
Maybe she let her guard down since she hadn't been caught before. How foolish. The rumors spread at the speed of light through the company, reaching the boss's ears.
My daughter having an affair with my colleague. It's the worst kind of gossip. It's ruined my reputation.
Clenching his fists in anger, John shouted, and Tim hesitantly opened his mouth.
Well, let me explain. There's a reason for this.
Even now, trying to make excuses? What a fool he is. I've never seen him like this. He always acted superior to me, but he could be so polite to someone above him.
An excuse? Fine, let's hear it.
Tim's face lit up, and he started speaking fluently, a stark contrast to his earlier silence.
Actually, your daughter repeatedly approached me, asking me to date her. I told her I couldn't because I was married.
John listened with folded arms, his expression skeptical.
She even said she'd be fine with just being my mistress or occasionally going out for meals, but I clearly refused. Then she started editing and posting photos.
Editing and posting photos? For what reason?
You stay out of this.
Tim glared at me before continuing.
She cut out group photos from company dinners to make it look like we were together. I told her to stop, but she then asked if I would make her my mistress.
So he was trying to say that the photos were the delusions of the boss's daughter, who wanted to make it seem like he was her boyfriend. I almost admired how coherent his excuse was.
If that's true, then my daughter was causing trouble for you.
Yes, I really wanted to discuss it with you, but I didn't want to provoke her.
John, who had been furious, now frowned and groaned. Tim had a satisfied look, as if saying, I managed to get through this. Could he actually be telling the truth? Both John and I were silent, unsure of what to believe. Then, Samantha, who had been hiding behind John, suddenly spoke up.
Dad's lying. I heard everything.
Her voice shattered the tense silence. Startled by our daughter's sudden revelation, which she had kept quiet until now, Tim responded with a forced smile. Using a gentle tone I had never heard before, he tried to calm her down.
Samantha, we're having an important adult conversation. Go back to your room.
But she ignored him.
On the way back from my practice match the other day, my teammates and I decided to grab some food.
Samantha, if you're going to talk about something irrelevant, go to your room.
Everyone's attention was now on Samantha. It was clear she was about to reveal something important. Tim, looking anxious, leaned forward.
We went to the fast food place near the station.
As Samantha spoke softly, sweat began to form on Tim's face, and his breathing became shallow, his chest rising and falling rapidly.
When we sat down, I saw Dad and a woman sitting across from us.
Stop it, Samantha.
she continued calmly, like a witness giving testimony in court. Unlike her, Tim was becoming visibly agitated.
There were about 8 of us, all in the same uniform, so we stood out. I thought Dad might notice me, but he was only looking at the woman.
Unbelievable. You didn't even recognize your own daughter's team uniform?
Shut up. You stay out of this.
My dad and the woman were holding hands. I couldn't hear much, but I did catch business trip and looking forward to the trip.
That's it.
That settles it.
Tim closed his eyes and bit his lip.
Damn it.
Hearing his barely audible words, I felt myself growing cold inside. John, now angrier than ever, shook with rage and shouted,
Figure out your next steps on your own. I can't believe I ever cared about you.
He stormed past Samantha, slamming the door behind him.
Wait, let me explain. Damn it.
Facing an effective dismissal, Tim collapsed to his knees.
This can't be happening. I worked so hard to get here.
Now's the time. I felt it was the moment. We're getting a divorce. I finally said the words I had been wanting to say. Tim's face quickly shifted from pale to angry as he looked up at me.
A divorce? Are you kidding? There's no way you can do that. You can't even make money.
He wobbled as he stood up from the floor. He probably thought I was talking nonsense. I'm not kidding. We're getting a divorce. I'll raise Samantha. He laughed mockingly and looked down at me even more condescendingly than usual.
You raise her? I've told you before. You're useless. How will you pay for her high school? And since you probably won't get into a public school, it's going to be a private one. That's expensive.
He sneered, peering into my face with a derisive smile. It's too bad. You're way off the mark. You really don't know anything about our daughter, do you? Well, I guess you were too busy with your affair.
What? Are you mocking me? And what do you mean I don't know?
Maybe it's time to tell him. Samantha just got accepted to a private high school on a sports scholarship, and the tuition is fully covered.
What?
Tim's eyes widened in disbelief, and he let out a pitiful sound. The practice match you dismissed as just a middle school game was actually a crucial one with many scouts watching. That's why I wanted you to come. Samantha got scouted and received a scholarship offer from a prestigious private high school for basketball.
But wait, what about living expenses? Even if tuition is covered, there are other costs.
He blurted out, trying to grasp at straws. Does he still think he has the upper hand?
No company is going to hire you, a housewife who hasn't worked in years. Maybe you could manage a store job at best. Former stay-at-home mom.
He assumed I would struggle to find a job, but the same applied to him. He seemed to have completely forgotten that he was also facing unemployment. I decided to tell Tim. Actually, I have an income.
What?
He looked at me with disbelief in his eyes.
There's no way a stay-at-home mom like you has an income. Stop lying. Pretending you're stronger than you are is pathetic.
He still looked down on me. I straightened my back and spoke with confidence. I'm not lying. You know how I've been making jewelry as a hobby? The ones you always mocked.
So what?
Those pieces, which were quite flashy, turned out to be popular as bridal accessories.
No way.
He flinched but quickly regained his composure.
Even if they're popular, those things only sell for, what, $8 a piece at most. No way that's anywhere near my salary.
His condescending attitude had reached an expert level. I almost respected him for it. But today was the end of it. How much did you say they sell for?
What? $8.
Wrong. $250.
Really?
He recoiled in shock, taking a big step back. As he stepped back, I inched closer. Yes, $250 each. They're considered affordable for bridal accessories, so I keep getting orders. If I sell 40 pieces, that's $10,000 a month.
Jesus Christ! $10,000 a month?
He's shocked. Of course, he was. $10,000 a month was more than Tim made. I had already surpassed the income level he had once told me to reach to be considered his equal. You told me before that if I made as much as you, we'd be equal. So by that logic, the one with a higher income should be superior, right? His lips quivered. He must be furious. The woman he belittled as useless was now earning more than him.
Who put that idea in your head?
Excuse me? What does he mean by that? I responded with a question.
Whose advice made you decide to sell them? Yeah, you must be cheating too. Did the guy you're seeing tell you how to make money and get a divorce? Huh?
Tim, now desperate, said whatever came to his mind. Just because Tim cheated, he assumed I must be cheating too. How insulting. As I was about to shout in anger, a calm voice came from behind us.
It was me.
Samantha said, looking straight at him.
What?
Tim asked.
I was the one who advised Mom to sell her jewelry. A classmate of mine has a hobby of making handmade crafts and sells them online. She makes about $100 a month, so I told Mom that hers could sell for much more.
Thanks to her, people now call me a popular bridal accessory designer. You always called me a useless housewife, but this made me really happy. So you see, I have enough money and work to live with Samantha. I declared this to Tim, who still seemed unable to process the situation, and delivered my final words. Please divorce me. After about 5 seconds of silence, he spat out.
Fine. Do whatever you want.
It was finally over. Relieved, I sank to the floor and leaned against the wall.
Mom, you did it.
Samantha and I shared a triumphant fist pump. It turned out she had also reached her limit with her dad's neglect. Tim never returned after that day, and our divorce was finalized a month later. I received the house as alimony for his affair and started a new life with my daughter. Since Tim had rarely been home before, life didn't feel much different. However, without his constant condescension, I noticed my mental health improving. Tim wasn't fired, but rumors about his affair and being kicked out of the house spread throughout the company, making it unbearable for him, so he resigned. He tried to find another job, but news of his affair had reached other companies in the same industry, forcing him to give up on positions where his skills and experience could be useful. Despite applying to various industries, he was repeatedly rejected, likely due to his condescending attitude and his age of 43. I'm sure the HR personnel and interviewers were younger than Tim. He probably looked down on them unconsciously because they were younger and had less work experience, which led to his rejection. So, what is my ex-husband doing now? A former colleague told me. She said that several people had seen him working at a store a bit away from his old workplace. When they spoke to him, he nervously packed their items as if embarrassed. But Tim, wanting to save face, apparently said this.
I'm not just a part-timer. I've been hired as a full-time employee and am undergoing initial training. In a month, I'll be working at headquarters. So I'm only a store clerk for now.
Given his suspicious behavior, those who saw him were convinced he was lying. One of them decided to ask another store clerk out of curiosity.
Is that guy a full-time employee?
No, he's a new part-timer.
And this is what they said. Speaking of store clerks, that day, Tim had said,
No company will hire a housewife who hasn't worked since getting married. At best, you could manage a store job. Former housewife.
the words he used to look down on me had ironically come back to him. He's no longer part of our lives. I felt a strange sense of nostalgia. But that feeling was quickly shattered by a phone call. It was from Tim. I pressed the reject call button and quietly placed my phone on the table. He kept calling repeatedly. At first, I answered, but each time, he begged in a lifeless voice.
Can we start over? I was wrong. You're the only one for me.
But when he realized I had no intention of getting back together, he became condescending again.
You must have been cheating too. Your jewelry business won't last long. I'll still take you back if you come now.
He'll never change. Well, it's not my concern anymore. I stretched and resumed working on the jewelry I had been making. Currently, I'm crafting a headdress perfect for a garden wedding. I wondered if it might be considered bad luck to buy jewelry from a divorced woman. But Samantha's amusing perspective made me laugh.
Maybe it's actually good luck. It could show your strong wish for the couple never to divorce.
Samantha is not the gloomy girl Tim thought she was. She's inherently positive and cheerful. He never bothered to see that. But now we are happy. To maintain this happiness, I'm considering selling this house to prevent Tim from showing up. According to a real estate agent, property values in this area are rising. We're thinking of moving to a secure high-rise condo near the station. I'll never have to see Tim again or endure his insults. Living with Samantha while doing my job I love makes this the most fulfilling time of my life.
Wow, really? That must be tough. Yeah, I got it. I'll be right there.
It might be a mishearing due to the pain, but I think I just heard Kenny say on the phone to Hannah that he's coming right away.
My sister Hannah was going to her favorite band's concert, but the train stopped due to an accident, and she can't get there. I'll go give her a ride.
After saying that, Kenny opened the door of the back seat where I was sitting.
You can get to the hospital on your own.
He quickly got me and my luggage out of the car, curled up in pain.
You should be able to get an ambulance in your condition. Listen, call 911 right away and ask for help. I won't forgive you if anything happens to our heir.
With that, he drove off.
Please, help me.
The number you have dialed is currently not in use. Please check the number and dial again. The number you have dialed is currently... I pretended it was a machine voice and repeated it several times, then hung up the smartphone and blocked Kenny's number. My name is Molly Smith. I'm 27 years old. I'm a grade school teacher, but currently on maternity leave. I'm nearly 10 months pregnant and my due date is coming up soon. I'm anxious about my first childbirth, but I'm counting down the days until I can meet my baby. My husband, Kenny, is 3 years older than me, 30 years old. We met in a university club and became friends, and started dating after he graduated. 2 years ago, we got married, and now we're expecting our first child. When we told both sets of parents, they were overjoyed and told us to take good care of ourselves. However, there was one person who responded disinterestedly.
More importantly, I told my boss I wanted next week off for a concert, but he said no, so I quit in a huff. Let them struggle with the staff shortage. Serves them right.
That was Kenny's sister. When we announced the pregnancy, she dismissed my news as that kind of thing and kept muttering complaints about her part-time job. My mother-in-law quickly scolded Kenny's sister, Hannah.
It doesn't concern me, after all. Besides, it's not even certain the baby will be born safely yet.
She said something outrageous. I was furious, but I've known this is how she is, so I didn't bother getting angry all over again. Hannah is Kenny's older sister by 7 years, a bit older. She was spoiled rotten by her grandparents, her father's parents, until she was old enough to remember, and she's never lost her princess attitude. That was the case even when we got married. Normally, out of consideration for the bride, guests wear outfits that allow her to shine. However, Hannah insisted on wearing a flashy dress and ultimately attended in it. It was a white mini dress with lots of feather decorations, like something an idol would wear. Apparently, she mistook our wedding for her own solo show.
Look, I really do look better in this dress. Sorry, it might be hard to tell who the bride is.
When my relatives and friends looked at Hannah in surprise, she mistook their stares for admiration and came over just to say that. I was more stunned than angry and couldn't reply. It's no wonder she wore such an outfit, but Kenny and his parents who didn't stop her are also to blame. My parents and I felt incredibly embarrassed. Before we got married, I thought Kenny was kind and a really good person, but at that moment, I first thought something was off. However, I still believed in Kenny then and had feelings for him, so I turned a blind eye. It's just Hannah who's odd. The in-laws are just dumbfounded by such a sister and couldn't say anything, and so is Kenny. I tried to convince myself of that. A little after starting our new life, there was a field trip for the second graders I teach. The destination was a planetarium in the city. Taking smart children out of school is nerve-wracking. You have to make sure no one gets lost or involved in an accident until you get back to school. They say the trip isn't over until you get home, and that's exactly right. I had to stay alert the whole time. As soon as we arrived at the planetarium, my phone, which was on vibrate in my back, started shaking. It was a call from an unknown number. I usually don't answer calls from unknown numbers, so I ignored it, but it kept ringing persistently, and I thought it might disturb the planetarium show, so I turned off the phone. After the show, it was time for the kids to go see the inner exhibits. Science museum staff would guide them, so it was a brief moment of relief for the chaperoning teachers. I sat down on a sofa in the break area with other teachers, drank a cup of coffee I bought from a vending machine, and took a break. When I turned my phone back on, there was an unbelievable number of missed calls. The unknown number had switched to Kenny's halfway through. Could something have happened to one of his parents? I excused myself from my colleagues and hurried off to make the call.
You're late. What were you doing?
He snapped at me immediately. I had told him I was on a school field trip today. I explained that I had turned off my phone so as not to disturb the show.
You could have just set it to vibrate. Why'd you turn it off? Anyway, you're at Civic Forest Park, right?
The science museum with the planetarium is located in a city-owned forest park. It's a bit far from the city center, so you can only get there by bus or car.
My sister's second favorite idol is having a pop-up concert at the outdoor theater, and they're selling limited edition photos with today's date. Can you pick one up for me?
For a moment, I thought he was joking. I'm here for work today. I can't leave my post for such an errand. The forest park is vast. and it takes about 20 minutes to walk back and forth between the Science Museum and the outdoor theater. Plus, it's raining today. Go out in this weather to buy photos for Hannah. I firmly declined and reiterated to Kenny that I was at work.
I'm disappointed, Molly. I didn't think you were such a cold person. That's not you, right? Molly's supposed to be kind-hearted. Please just go do it.
Kenny tried to guilt trip and flatter me into going, but I was at work and couldn't accept, no matter what he said.
Fine, whatever. I'm done.
Kenny shouted this and hung up. I felt a chill in my heart. I couldn't believe Kenny would ask for something so unreasonable. It was incredibly unpleasant and sad. Still, I managed to control my emotions and finish the school field trip. When I got home, Kenny wasn't there, but there was a message on my smartphone saying he was waiting at his parents' house. Feeling heavy-hearted, I walked the 15 minutes to my in-laws' house. There were Kenny's parents, Kenny and Hannah.
Apologize to Hannah.
That was the first thing said. Hannah had learned about the pop-up concert during her part-time job, rushed out of work to the outdoor theater, but by the time she arrived, the limited edition photos had sold out.
Poor thing, she's been crying a lot.
Hannah was still sniffling, looking down. Kenny was rubbing her back, making a pitiful face. Checking on how my in-laws are doing. Both of them looked sorry but did nothing more. They probably haven't even considered what to do about their unreasonable daughter and son. Hannah sniffled for a while, but eventually wiped her face with a crumpled idle merchandise towel and smiled brightly.
It's okay now. Instead, buy this for me.
She thrust her smartphone at me. It was a screen from a flea market app.
See, she'll forgive you for today if you buy that for her. Lucky, huh?
Kenny pointed excitedly to a photo that seemed to be the limited edition print from today. $300. It was priced at $300, a stark contrast to the prints that were originally selling for $5.
It's a steal, right? All it takes is just that little to make up with your sister.
Just that. $300 is just that. For a single piece of paper. Hannah was looking at me with an expectant smile. With her right hand, she was offering the smartphone, and with her left, she pressed it against her lips, fully playing up her cute me act. Kenny was adoringly gazing at Hannah's profile. The in-laws, just like before, gave me apologetic looks but seemed to have no intention of doing more. I had no intention of playing along with this farce. However, I realized that if I didn't make my stance clear now, I would continue to be manipulated in the future. And so, I decided to give in to Hannah's demand this time. Alright, I'll buy it. Hannah's face lit up, and she clapped her hands like a child. But I want you to know this isn't an apology. This is the first and last time. I won't lift a finger for Hannah ever again. This is my declaration. In front of a surprised Kenny and Hannah, and the in-laws exchanging troubled looks, I won the $300 print. Then I left the in-laws' house without a word and went home alone. For a while, Kenny stayed at his parents' house and didn't come back, but eventually, he returned as if nothing had happened. I silently accepted it. I had no intention of asking what Hannah did with the print, nor did I plan to have any more interactions with her. If anything more was said or done, I was ready to end our marriage. Perhaps Kenny sensed my resolve because he stopped mentioning Hannah altogether. And so, we returned to being a normal couple and settled into a peaceful life. During that time, I noticed something was off. Thinking it might be the case, I bought a test kit from the pharmacy and it came back positive. I've got pregnant. To share the news, I visited my in-laws for the first time in months, and while they were delighted, Hannah treated it as just another thing. After that, I never met Hannah again, and the baby in my belly grew healthily. It's a boy. I wonder what kind of cute child he will be. And finally, the time for childbirth arrived. My water broke, and I quickly prepared to go to the hospital. The labor pains started soon after.
Are you okay? I'll take you to the hospital right now.
Kenny gently helped me into the car and drove to the hospital. Despite my anxiety about childbirth, I knew I would be okay because Kenny was with me. I calmed myself and gently stroked my belly. "It's okay. It's okay. We'll meet soon," I whispered. Suddenly, a familiar sound echoed through the car. It was Kenny's smartphone. This ringtone must be from his sister Hannah.
Hello, yes.
Kenny pulled the car over to the side and answered a call. Why is he answering the phone now? Wasn't he supposed to rush me to the hospital? While enduring another wave of pain, I thought this.
What, really? That stuff? Yeah, I got it. I'll be right there.
Is it just my mishearing due to the pain? Or did Kenny just say he'll come right over in response to Hannah's call?
Hannah said she can't make it to her fave's live concert because the train stopped due to an accident. I'm going to give her a ride to the venue.
After saying that, Kenny opened the rear car door where I was sitting.
You can get yourself to the hospital, right?
He quickly got me and my luggage out of the car, curling up in pain.
You should be able to get an ambulance in your condition. Listen, call 911 right away and ask for help. I won't forgive you if anything happens to our heir.
With that, he drove off. I was left on the roadside with my luggage. Is this really happening? To treat his wife, who is about to give birth, like this? I no longer even feel angry. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Fortunately, there were no passers-by around. I laughed so loudly that I thought it was good timing. My mind was surprisingly calm, but my body couldn't stop laughing. Hello, I need an ambulance, please. Yes, the location is... Looking at a nearby building, I provided my approximate location. I got into the ambulance that arrived and headed to the hospital alone. The hospital quickly admitted me and started preparing for childbirth. I called my parents and calmly explained what happened today. They were speechless and said they would come right away. When I was left on the street, I felt I could handle whatever came next alone, but knowing people were coming to support me was reassuring. Waves of pain came and went. The nurses and midwives checked on me, telling me things were progressing well. About an hour after arriving at the hospital, my phone rang. It was during a lull in the contractions, so I picked it up and saw the last person I wanted to see on the display. It was Kenny. I ignored the phone for a while, but after several missed calls and hang-ups, I decided to answer. Not because I cared about Kenny, but because it was too annoying. When I pressed the call button, Kenny's voice burst out.
Hello, Molly. Oh, thank goodness you answered.
Kenny's voice sounded genuinely relieved. Maybe he was finally worried about his pregnant wife and unborn child he'd left behind. But that thought was quickly proven wrong.
Please, help me.
I thought I was being told something nonsensical. What kind of help could he possibly need at a time like this, with his wife about to give birth?
Actually, there was a little accident at a rest area.
The number you have dialed is not in service. Please check the number and dial again. The number you have dialed is currently... I pretended it was a recorded message and repeated it a few times before I hung up and blocked Kenny's number. I gave birth safely to a boy. It was surprisingly an easy delivery. Perhaps the shock of the events had numbed my senses to the pain. It was over before I knew it, and the hospital staff were amazed at how smooth it went for a first-time birth. After all, an easier experience is always better. As I watched my sleeping son, I felt truly happy. He was born so quickly that my parents, who rushed from far away, missed the birth. They seemed apologetic, but they were more relieved that my son and I were safe and they smiled warmly. Their smiles made me happy, too. I didn't inform my in-laws. If Kenny wants to tell them, he can do it himself. Even if they did come, I have no intention of letting them see my son. This child is mine alone. He has no connection to Kenny's family. I had already told the hospital not to let anyone from Kenny's family visit. Only my parents were welcome. Perhaps because I had asked to be notified and turned away anyone else. I never saw anyone from Kenny's family during my hospital stay. After 5 days in the hospital, I went straight home with my parents. Once home, I immediately contacted a lawyer to start divorce proceedings. Leaving a pregnant woman in labor by the roadside is surely grounds for divorce. The lawyer was appalled and mentioned it could constitute neglect of a guardian or even malicious abandonment causing harm. Abandoning a pregnant woman in labor, who can't defend herself, on the roadside is nothing short of monstrous, he said, and I agreed. Incidentally, Kenny had called for help that day, but I had already shut down any communication from his family, so I remained unaware of what happened. I asked the lawyer to find out what had happened, just out of curiosity. The story I heard from the lawyer was beyond saving. After abandoning me to pick up his sister Hannah, Kenny stopped at a rest area on the highway. It was about a 90-minute drive to the concert venue, including time for trains and buses. Hannah, who had left home with plenty of time to buy merchandise and take photos, decided to eat something on the way. Of course, at Kenny's expense. After eating a specialty meal at the rest area, they were about to head to the venue when Hannah flung open the car door and hit the car next to them. This is what's called a door ding. She hit it hard enough to cause significant damage to the door of the car next to them. Normally, you'd apologize to the car owner, call the police or insurance, or take some action, but incredibly, they decided to flee.
No one's looking right now, we're good. Besides, if we're late, we'll miss the concert.
As Kenny was about to drive away after hearing this, the owner of the car came back. And to make matters worse, there were 4 rather intimidating-looking guys. Surrounded and unable to drive away, Kenny was dragged out of the car and scolded for trying to flee. Meanwhile, Hannah was pleading with these tough guys, saying she needed to leave or she'd be late for the concert. It's one thing to be indulged with ridiculous demands within the family, but it's unrealistic to expect strangers, let alone the victims of your actions, to comply. Hannah desperately tried to charm and beg, but honestly, only her family would think she's cute. Of course, the victims weren't going to accept her pleas. Fearing she wouldn't make it, not just to the concert, but even to the merchandise sale before it, Hannah started screaming and crying loudly. The tough guys were lambasting them for trying to escape. Hannah in her flashy concert attire was wailing. Service area employees and customers gathered around, causing a huge scene. Distressed, Kenny called me for help, which is bewildering. What was he thinking? Did he forget that I was on my way to the hospital in labor? Or did he expect that I'd pause my childbirth to come and rescue him? Maybe he wanted me to drive Hannah to her concert. That might have been his idea of help. Regardless of the reason, going there to help was out of the question. Even if I were in any normal condition, I'd decline rushing to such a scene. They need to handle their own problems. It turned out Kenny hadn't insured his car. I had given him money from our budget because he said it was necessary, but it appears he'd been diverting those funds. That money went to Hannah's allowance. At 37, Hannah still works part-time because she's following an idol group. She could find a decent job if she wanted, but she refuses because she wouldn't be able to take time off for concerts. And it seems she often quits these jobs on a whim for wanting a day off, or gets fired for taking too many. She frivolously spends a bit of money she earns and the allowance she gets from her parents. And of course, she mooches off Kenny too. Kenny had been giving her the car insurance money as allowance and pretended nothing was amiss. The accident involved a luxury foreign car. The repair costs would be entirely out of pocket. I refused his absurd suggestion that we should work together to pay it off. The divorce discussions were contentious. Kenny was furious with the lawyer, unable to understand why he should be divorced.
I was just trying to get my sister to a concert on time. Who could have predicted such an accident would happen?
Yeah, Kenny did nothing wrong. It's those guys who are to blame, making such a big deal over a little scratch. They ranted bitterly about the victims, and apparently, after that, they started bad-mouthing me. It seems that Kenny thought my wanting a divorce was because of that accident.
Molly is being childish for wanting a divorce over a minor car accident. Tell her to stop fooling around and come back home right away.
That's right, just over that. After criticizing the victims, they started a parade of insults about me. Kenny and Hannah both were running me down, and the in-laws just sat there silently with troubled faces. I could imagine it as if it were happening right in front of me. When the lawyer told Kenny that the main reason was not the accident, but abandoning a pregnant woman halfway through, Kenny seemed genuinely shocked.
What? Over that? But Molly got to the hospital by ambulance and gave birth safely, right? There wasn't any problem, was there?
It's really being blown out of proportion.
Yeah, and Hannah was about to miss her concert because the train stopped, right? Wasn't it natural for me to drive her?
Kenny smugly stated this, and Hannah nodded vigorously in agreement next to him. Of course, the in-laws just sat there with troubled expressions. The lawyer mentioned he was getting a headache trying to figure out how to explain the situation. He carefully prefaced that the divorce had nothing to do with the accident and that issues should be resolved on their side. Then, he explained how serious Kenny's actions were. Despite repeated explanations, Kenny kept insisting that everything turned out fine since I managed to get to the hospital on my own and nothing happened. However, after the lawyer persistently explained that both the baby and I could have been at risk, and Kenny could have faced legal charges if things had gone wrong, he finally seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation. He turned pale, began to tremble, and asked if he and Hannah could get arrested. Even then, he seemed more worried about himself and Hannah than about me and the baby, the lawyer reported with a tone of pity. It was a struggle, but the divorce was finalized successfully, and I was free from Kenny and his family. I felt relieved, but Kenny was clingy, continuing to call persistently and send messages on social media asking for reconciliation. It was so annoying that I had to block him again, and when I did, he started sending letters to my parents' house. According to Kenny's letter, he didn't expect me to be so upset over such a thing.
Since the childbirth went well, isn't it harsh to divorce over just one mistake? You were supposed to be more forgiving. Give me another chance. Don't you want a daughter next time? It's sad for our son to be an only child. Besides, our son is the heir to the Smith family. Give him back. If you do, I'll acknowledge you once again as a daughter-in-law of the Smith family. It's not a bad deal, is it?
It started off humbly but gradually took a more condescending tone, obviously influenced by Hannah, as indicated at the end of the letter.
So, my sister says she's willing to forgive you now. Think it over.
I could predict it from the moment I started reading the letter, but I almost laughed reading it, and by the end, I burst out laughing. Once I had the lawyer reiterate a no-contact order and mention that any further contact would result in an increase in damages, communication stopped abruptly. I can only wryly smile at how quickly he backed off once money was involved. It seems money matters more to them than the important heir. From the in-laws, there has been nothing. From the beginning to the end, they've been like extras in a drama. just background characters. They haven't expressed any desire to see their grandchild, so there's no need for me to say anything either. Since I can't trust the entire family, I demanded a lump sum payment for alimony and child support. I couldn't bear the thought of enduring a relationship with them over the years, and I anticipated they might stop making payments eventually. The total, including my payments, accident repair costs, and other fees, was substantial. Kenny took out a loan against his parents' house in his name to pay it all at once. I hope it doesn't come to them losing their house, but that's no longer my concern. Even the combined alimony and child support won't be enough to raise a child to adulthood. Once I'm feeling better and my son is more settled, I plan to return to work as a teacher. Fortunately, my parents have offered to help, and I'm sure we'll manage somehow. I want my son to think for himself and be able to live independently. Not like his father, who was only connected by blood, nor like Hannah. And certainly not like the in-laws, who were always there, yet it was hard to tell if they truly were. Though my marriage ended disappointingly, I am grateful that it gave me my son. From now on, it will just be the two of us, living happily. And if there's a new person in the future who loves my son and me, I won't hesitate to embrace that new happiness.
Lately, after Dan's bath, I've noticed white threads floating in the bathtub. When I asked Dan about it, he just evades the question. On the eve of Dan going on a business trip, he gave me some aromatherapy oil that's supposed to help with morning sickness. After using it nightly as Dan instructed, I experienced severe abdominal pain and had to call for an ambulance. At the maternity clinic, when I explained the situation, the doctor was shaken. He said it was an aromatherapy oil that could endanger both the mother and baby. Suspicious of Dan's infidelity, I called his office and found out he had taken a personal day off to match the dates with Cindy. Heading to Cindy's apartment, I waited in the car and soon saw Cindy and Dan coming from across the street.
I want to live together soon.
If this plan works, we can push May back to her parents' house.
If she loses the baby and becomes emotionally unstable, it won't seem odd for us to live apart.
It's her fault for getting pregnant when I'm not even good with kids.
I buried my face in the steering wheel and sobbed. Eventually, I lifted my head and swore revenge on Dan and Cindy. I will never forgive them. I am May, a 40-year-old housewife. I met Dan at work and we got married 5 years ago. Dan works for a major company. He's a rank-and-file employee, but earns a good salary due to his diligent work. Recently, I finally got pregnant, something I've always wanted. Looking at the ultrasound picture, I eagerly anticipated the day I would meet our baby. But lately, I've been unbearably anxious. Something was off about Dan. Eventually, I realized Dan's true nature, and it sent chills down my spine. I became close to Dan when I was assigned to his team at his company, a subsidiary where we worked together. Dan, who was not the aggressive type at work, but was adored by his boss and loved by colleagues, had a gentle demeanor. Being someone who struggled with communication and took time to open up to others, I admired Dan. So when he asked me out, I seriously wondered what he saw in me. When he finally proposed, he answered with a gentle smile.
I like that you seem modest and obedient, and I find your looks appealing.
As someone who is self-conscious about being petite and having a youthful face, I was surprised but also felt joy. Afterward, we asked Dan's boss to be our go-between, and we got married. The first year passed without major issues, as we both reveled in our newlywed life. However, starting from the second year, I began struggling with balancing household chores and work. Dan had forgotten our promise to share domestic duties and started dumping all the housework on me.
I know it's tough, May, since you're working full-time too, but I just can't relax with the house in disarray.
I was puzzled. I kept up with the dishes and laundry diligently. It was just that I couldn't find the time to vacuum every day, leaving a bit of dust in the corners of the room. I wipe everything with cleaning wipes every day. We live in an apartment, and it would be bothersome to others if I vacuum early in the morning or late at night.
Yeah, I get that, but I like things clean. It just doesn't feel comfortable for me.
Despite saying this, Dan's study was always a mess. He told me not to enter his study, so I only peeked from the hallway. During that time, I was horrified by the sight of his completely cluttered room. The room was so cluttered with empty snack bags, liquor cans, and car magazines that there was hardly any place to step. His desk at work is tidy because he cares about appearances. Dan's complaints continued.
The meals have been pretty simple lately. You're just reheating pre-made stuff. I want freshly made food, but this feels no different from ready-made meals.
I was astonished. He compared the meals I prepared during the weekends to ready-made meals. Look, keeping the house spotless, cooking fresh meals all the time, and working full-time. That's impossible without hiring a housekeeper.
Ben, why don't you quit your job?
Dan said that coolly. But what about?
You could just become a full-time homemaker. I'll work more to make up for it.
A wave of anxiety swept over me. What if we have a child in the future and the education costs exceed our budget? While I was hesitating for an answer, Dan looked into my face and smiled kindly.
I'm worried about your body. It hurts to see you go limp every day.
Dan.
Please, become a homemaker for me.
I was proud of my job. I enjoyed my work environment and wanted to continue until retirement if possible, but I didn't want to cause Dan worry. After much hesitation and regretfully bidding farewell by my colleagues and boss, I resigned. I've always been shy and take time to warm up to others. But once I get close to someone, I tend to have deep and long-lasting relationships. That's why I vowed to always cherish Dan, whom I became involved with. Dan also treated me with care. However, as soon as I became a full-time homemaker and started depending on Dan's income, he began to adopt an intimidating attitude towards me.
Really? The orthopedic clinic changed doctors?
Yes, it used to be a female doctor. When I went there after a long time, her son in his 20s was treating me. He took over as the head of the clinic because his mother retired. Dan showed his displeasure when I mentioned going to the hospital after twisting my ankle.
Then stop going there. We'll switch to the hospital in the next town where a female doctor works.
But they asked me to keep coming until I'm fully healed.
No way.
He raised his voice unusually.
Just the thought of a young man touching your leg makes me feel sick. Are you okay with that?
I was surprised by Dan's words. It's just a medical examination. It can't be helped.
There are other doctors, right? We're changing to the next town next time. Otherwise, I'll stop giving you money for the visits.
Reluctantly, I switched to a hospital in the next town to appease Dan's jealousy. I didn't realize he was this jealous. I laughed to myself, but it gradually became no laughing matter. The next thing Dan complained about was my regular hair salon. When I mentioned that my stylist was going on maternity leave and I would be seen by a male hairstylist next, Dan secretly visited the salon and then started nitpicking.
That guy is no good. Paying $50 for such a haircut is a ripoff. Why don't you change to someone else?
I was taken aback, but calmly explained. That's the going rate around here. He's well regarded among people I know.
How so? He's just popular for his looks. He must be hitting on his clients.
Don't say that. He has a wife and kids.
Then it's cheating.
Dan sneered.
Just thinking of that guy touching your hair with his sleazy hands makes me so frustrated I can't sleep at night.
What? It's just a haircut. Stop making a fuss. Despite my protest, I eventually switched to another salon because he wouldn't stop complaining. Dan began to find fault even with me just going out briefly.
It's odd for a housewife to be out and about all the time. You should devote more to me.
What are you talking about? I do all the housework properly. I didn't quit my job just to be cooped up at home all day. Hey, if I want to go back to work, maybe part-time would be manageable.
No way.
Dan flatly refused.
The housework would surely suffer. I'm supporting us. So what's there to be dissatisfied about?
I was speechless at Dan's frowning face. When I confided in my college friend, Tanya, she was also astonished. Tanya works in the HR department at Dan's company.
Dan listens to us at work and never shows disdain towards women, but I see he's different in private.
He uses male chauvinism as an excuse, and it's troubling, but I don't want to fight with Dan, and he doesn't verbally abuse me, so I'm at a loss. Sipping coffee at a cafe, I sighed.
If it gets any worse, talk to me. I'm on your side, May.
Thanks. I replied with a smile, but I gradually became reluctant to go out and started to spend my days feeling depressed. One day, after feeling unwell for a while, I tried a pregnancy test, and it turned out positive. I couldn't help but cry out in the bathroom. I was so happy I cried, having almost given up hope due to my age. When I told Dan upon his return home, he momentarily tensed up before smiling.
Really? I can't believe it.
Me neither. I'll get it checked at the hospital tomorrow. I'll make sure to go to a place with a female doctor.
When should we tell your parents?
Let's wait until it's stable.
Right. We don't know yet if everything will be okay.
His words troubled me, but they were true. For now, I'll focus on having a healthy baby. However, contrary to my excitement, Dan seemed unwelcoming of the pregnancy. He had always said he was not fond of children and had agreed that we would give up if natural conception didn't happen. but I hoped his feelings would change now that we were expecting. There are plenty of people who say they don't like kids, but love their own. So I casually brought up the topic every day, hoping to make the reality of our baby feel more real to him. Nova, Halora, Freya. Modern names are so stylish, aren't they? Unisex names seem to be the trend. I continued speaking, undeterred by Dan, who was absorbed in his phone. What kind of names do you like, Dan?
Can't you see I'm busy? I'll leave it up to you, May.
I couldn't hide my disappointment at his curt response. On another day. You're taking a day off soon, right? There's a prenatal checkup that day. Let's go together.
Why should a man go? It's not like it matters to me.
I felt my cheeks stiffen. It was strange to hear it doesn't matter from a father-to-be. He delivered the final blow with a half smile, leaving me speechless.
I'm not good with horror movies, so spare me the delivery room, okay?
I was utterly disappointed by the inappropriate comparison, especially since childbirth is a life-threatening endeavor. However, plagued by morning sickness, I didn't have the energy to argue with Dan. Nausea, drowsiness, and lethargy made it almost impossible for me to cook or clean. Spending the day slumped on the sofa wasn't unusual anymore. I was worried about Dan's complaints, but it seemed even he found it difficult to grumble when I was frequently rushing to the restroom. Passing through the hallway with laundry, I heard the shower and remembered. Indeed, after Dan bathed, there were always white threads floating in the bathtub. It's thinner than human hair, and when scooped up, it's about 3 centimeters long. When I asked Dan about it, after a brief silence, he chuckled and shrugged.
That's just dirt, May. You were slacking off on cleaning the bath, aren't you?
No, it doesn't seem like that. I can't explain it well.
All right. Let's try to clean more, okay?
I felt brushed off, but not wanting to argue, I didn't press further. Not wanting to bathe in a tub with mysterious floating threads, I decided to stick to showers for the time being. The connection between Dan and the threads remained unclear. His recent string of late nights at work and increased business trips might be related. One Friday, Dan approached me with a beaming smile.
I've got a business trip to Chicago starting tomorrow. Sorry to leave you alone for a week, especially when you were having such a hard time with the morning sickness.
It's part of your job. It can't be helped. Take care, okay?
Yeah. By the way, I got something good.
He handed me a stylish white box. When I opened it, there were 7 small bottles with black lids lined up inside. Is this aromatherapy oil?
Yes, it's supposed to help with morning sickness.
Dan seemed excited.
A colleague's wife tried it and her appetite came back.
Really? How do I use it?
Add it to the bath water. It's effective as an aromatherapy bath. I asked for the instructions and wrote them down, so use it like this.
I'm not fond of artificial scents and usually stay away from aromatherapy oils and incense. I was grateful Dan wrote down the instructions. While reading the note, Dan stressed seriously.
Make sure you do it every day. For your sake, and the baby's as well.
Got it. Thank your colleague for me. From the date Dan left on his business trip, I took an aromatherapy bath every night. Not seeing any white threads, I felt safe soaking in the water. Let's see, 1 bottle per 200 liters of water. That's quite a lot. As I poured it into the bathtub, a potent fragrance wafted up with the steam. It seemed relaxing and likely beneficial for the baby as well. There were no immediate effects, but perhaps my appetite would be back by the time Dan returned from his trip. I continued using it, feeling hopeful, and reached the 5th day. During the bath, I suddenly felt a dull pain in my lower abdomen. Initially dismissing it as constipation, the pain intensified. Moaning in pain, I changed into my home clothes and called an ambulance. I was crushed by the fear that something might have happened to the baby. I informed them I was pregnant and asked to be taken to my regular maternity clinic. As I tried to explain my condition to the female head doctor, she crinkled her nose. Did you put any bath additives in your water? I've been taking aromatherapy baths. The doctor frowned. My husband got it from a colleague. It's supposed to be good for morning sickness. I don't know if it's related to the abdominal pain, so I brought it with me just in case. When I handed over the note and the bottle of aromatherapy oil my husband had given me, the doctor's face changed, and she started trembling. Doctor, did you use this daily in an enclosed bathroom? Yes. After a moment of hesitation, the doctor told me in a firm voice. The herb used in this aromatherapy oil can cause uterine contractions. It's strictly forbidden for pregnant women. It could have caused a miscarriage. Everything went dark before my eyes. I felt faint but managed to stay conscious and urgently requested an examination. Fortunately, the baby was safe. I was told that my body should recover with some rest. I stayed in the hospital overnight and returned home by taxi the next morning. Back home, I still couldn't believe it. I had used the oil exactly as Dan had told me, and yet it had almost endangered our baby. I felt an urgent need to confront him with my anger. Waiting for his lunch break, I called Dan's mobile, but it just kept ringing. A bad feeling suddenly crossed my mind. His recent aloof behavior, the sudden increase in overtime and business trips, and now this incident. I had heard that many husbands cheat during their wife's pregnancy. Deciding to check with Tanya, I called her mobile. Sorry to bother you during your break, but listen. Tanya gasped on the other end of the line.
So you're in a place with signal now.
What are you talking about?
Aren't you supposed to be feeling sick from morning sickness and staying at your parents' place? I heard it's in the countryside with poor signal, so I held back from sending messages. Since Dan is with you, I thought it would be okay.
I'm at home.
What do you mean?
I heard Dan is on a business trip to Chicago. I could hear Tanya sighing.
He must have wanted to prevent me from contacting you, perhaps fearing his affair would be exposed.
That's what it is. Hey, is there a female employee who took time off during the same period?
Let me check. Oh, it's Cindy from the accounting department. Should I give you her address?
Yes, please. My anger outweighed my shock. I was sure Dan was there. I hung up and drove to the address Tanya had given me. I forgot mine nausea in the heat of my anger. I parked my car where I could see the front entrance of the apartment building and waited for Dan and Cindy to appear. My car was common enough that I wasn't worried about being noticed while lying in wait. After about an hour, a couple holding hands approached from the other side of the street. Dan was with a woman with flashy makeup. She must be Cindy. Dan, carrying a heavy eco bag, looked visibly thrilled. Looking at him ignited a fiery anger in me. He was brazenly having an affair after putting me through such a hellish ordeal.
It's like we're newlyweds. It's so fun.
Cindy's shrill voice could easily be heard down the street.
I can't wait to live with you, Dan.
If this plan works, we can push May back to her parents' house. Divorce is tricky, but separation should be safe.
Cindy agreed with Dan's smug assertion.
If she loses the baby and becomes emotionally unstable, it won't seem odd for you both to live apart. You're so smart.
It's her fault for getting pregnant when I'm not good with kids.
Even after they disappeared into the apartment, I sat there stunned for a while. Then, intense rage surged from within. Tears overflowed from my eyes before I realized it. I'm so frustrated and ashamed. I felt nauseous as I blamed myself for not seeing through and trusting such a person. Leaning over the steering wheel, I sobbed. Eventually, lifting my head, I gritted my teeth and vowed revenge on Dan and Cindy. Dan and Cindy, I will never forgive you. 2 days later. In the afternoon, I went with Tanya, who had taken the afternoon off, to Cindy's apartment. I stayed outside the entrance hall to avoid being seen by the intercom camera.
Hello, Tanya. What brings you here?
When Tanya pressed the intercom, Cindy responded immediately. Her saccharine voice was grating.
Weren't you supposed to finish some documents at home? You left some materials on your desk.
Cindy easily believed Tanya's lie.
Oh no, silly me. Thank you. I'll go get them now.
It's okay, I'll bring them up to your room.
Really? Then please do. I'll unlock the door for you.
Once the door was opened, we went up to Cindy's apartment in the elevator. Making sure I wasn't caught on camera, I stayed back while Tanya called Cindy out. Soon the door opened, and Cindy, in a bathrobe and casual clothes, appeared. Taking a shower in the middle of the afternoon. How luxurious. They might have been planning to get cozy with each other after this.
Tanya, you're a lifesaver. Really reliable. Eat.
Cindy let out a sharp scream when I suddenly showed my face. As she tried to close the door, I wedged my bag in, slid my hand into the gap, and pried the door open. Cindy, with a resigned look, allowed Tanya and me into the room. From a half-open room at the end of the hall, we could hear Dan speaking in baby talk. Tiptoeing down the hallway and peering into the room, I saw Dan in just his underwear. His eyes softened, brushing a long-haired cat.
Tuna, you're being such a good boy, staying still. I'll give you a treat later. Your fur is so smooth and silky today. You're the most handsome cat in the world.
Meow.
So that's it. The white threads were the white cat's fur. No wonder there was so much fur. He brushed his bare upper body against it, and he didn't rinse himself before getting in the bath. How could he do that before I, a pregnant woman, used it afterward? Eck, that's gross. Rage bubbled up as I saw Dan's affectionate face toward the cat. He cared more for his affair partner's cat than for our unborn child. The cat was the first to notice my resentful gaze. It flinched, looking scared, and ran to a corner of the room.
What's wrong, Tuna? Come and play with Daddy.
Since when did you become a cat's dad? Or did you get Cindy pregnant too? Dan's eyes widened as I stepped into the living room.
Why are you?
Dan, you've been careless.
Tanya emerged from behind me, causing him to startle.
That's right. You and Tanya are friends.
Dan exhaled as if in resignation, and Cindy hugged him from behind.
Dan, we've been caught.
It's okay, Cindy. Leave it to me.
His posture, standing there in his underwear, was ridiculous, and I almost laughed at the absurdity of the situation.
How are you feeling, May?
I've told you countless times how bad the morning sickness is.
No, I mean, since you are here, you must be fine.
Didn't your wife stop using the aromatherapy oil?
Cindy interjected.
That's why both the mother and child are healthy.
Oh, right.
You really should trust your husband more.
Cindy smirked, and Dan looked disappointed, which infuriated me even more. I did use it, because I was happy that Dan seemed to care about my well-being. Then I was struck with severe pain and had to call an ambulance. It was almost too late. I shouted, and Cindy interrupted with her sugary tone.
What a shame. A baby that daddy doesn't want should just disappear.
What? Do you even realize what you've done? You tried to take the lives of me and my baby.
That's not true.
Dan smirked dismissively.
It's not even born yet. So treating it like a person is ridiculous. Or are you even pregnant? You're just saying that to get attention because you sensed I was cheating, right?
Exactly. And the morning sickness must be an act, too?
My brain felt like it was boiling with rage at their laughter. I showed you the ultrasound picture, didn't I?
Maybe you borrowed it from another pregnant woman. Your stomach is flat. Can't trust that.
Could be someone else's kid, you know.
Enough from you two.
Even as Tanya scolded them, Dan and Cindy just grinned.
Well, even if it is my kid, I don't want it.
The words "I don't want it" tore my heart.
Don't do things without my permission. You're causing unnecessary trouble?
Why do you deny it so much? Do you hate the idea of being a father that much? Are you that bad with babies? When I confronted him with the question, Dan frowned and retorted sharply.
Of course I hate it. Who's going to take care of me when the baby's born?
Dan then unleashed a tirade of complaints against me.
May, you used to be cute when we got married, but you've gotten ugly with age. Being pregnant makes it unbearable. You become thin, pale, and your skin is rough. No femininity at all.
Pointing at me, he continued his rant.
It's shameful for you to call yourself my wife while looking like that. I should never have married a 35-year-old woman.
And you, Dan, are getting a belly and losing your hair, becoming quite the middle-aged man yourself. Dan completely ignored my comment.
And on top of that, All you talk about lately is the baby. Have you forgotten I'm the main one here? As my wife, you should prioritize me. I don't care about the baby in your stomach.
I was dumbfounded by Dan's words. They were like those of a child. It was clear that both my unborn child and I would be unhappy with him as a father. Cindy, who had been gleefully listening to Dan's tirade, chimed in.
Dan doesn't care about a 40-year-old hag, right? A young beauty like me is what he deserves.
Right. It seems he'd be fine with any young and pretty girl. I agreed with a knowing look to Tanya. Tanya then pulled out not documents, but photos from a large envelope she had brought. Cindy watched curiously as the photos were laid out on the living room table. Looking at Dan, his previously arrogant demeanor had vanished, replaced by an awkward expression and visible unease.
You know about these girls, right, Cindy? They all work in the same sales department as Dan.
What are these?
I've gathered some voice evidence. Let's start the fun.
Hey, stop it, please.
After announcing what she had, Tanya pressed a play button on her phone despite Dan's pleas.
I'm secretly dating Dan. Keep it a secret from others. Cindy is already an old lady at 28, so he switched to a young girl like me.
Dan told me I'm his ideal woman. We've been dating for 3 months now. He's getting a divorce soon, right?
Dan said we should keep our office romance a secret because it would be troublesome if it got out. The trip during his business travel was so fun.
As Cindy's eyes narrowed with increasing anger, Dan looked surprised.
Tanya, how do you know I'm dating these girls?
You've applied for leave or worked overtime on the same days as these girls multiple times. I'm in HR, so it was obvious. When I prodded, they were more than happy to spill everything. They were eager to talk.
To a 24-year-old, 28 and 40-year-old ladies are all old women, right? I taunted Cindy, causing her face to flush. Tearfully, she looked up at Dan with resentment, choking out.
It's awful. To think you were with others besides me.
It's not like that. Cindy, you're the most important. You are the real deal. The others are just for fun.
Dan became flustered and started making excuses.
Look, a man needs a break, right? I can be kind to you, Cindy, because I let off steam with other women. You like to kind me, don't you?
It was nauseating. Instead of making a bad situation worse with poor excuses, he should have just apologized. Predictably, Cindy became furious.
What kind of logic is that?
Why are you mad? You're the one I treat the best. Shouldn't you be happy?
How dare you? I had no idea you were like this.
Cindy was nearly lunging at Dan, screaming and crying, while I watched with a detached gaze. What are you saying? It's because you're this kind of person that you cheat so easily and have no sense of responsibility as a father. You even tried to harm our unborn baby. Cindy stopped crying and looked intently at me. Both of us failed to see the true nature of men.
Shut up. Don't lump me in with you.
She snapped at me and then turned her anger back towards Dan.
Don't think you can do this to me and get away with it.
That's my line. You play the victim, but you were complicit in the aromatherapy oil incident, weren't you? I told Cindy in a stern tone. I've already reported it to the police. Both of you will be arrested for assault. Prepare yourselves. And I recorded all of today's confessions as evidence. Dan looked at me with panic.
Arrest. You turn your husband into the police. If you do that, your baby's father will be a criminal?
Hospitals have a duty to report. I think the clinic director already did. And don't worry, I'll be divorcing you. After exchanging a glance with Dan, Cindy started to defend herself vehemently.
I had nothing to do with it. Dan was the one who planned and executed everything.
Come on. When I complained about my nagging wife, you were the one who suggested using aromatherapy oil to make her ill and drive her out.
What? You got tired of her but said divorce was too complicated. You're the one who came to me asking for a way out.
Being able to come up with the aromatherapy idea. Oh, what a scary woman. Do you perhaps have a criminal record?
That's rich? Og, you're the worst. I only went along with that because you said it would be fine. Then you cheated on me and got caught so easily. I should never have gotten involved with you.
Dan clicked his tongue as Cindy resumed her hysterics.
How annoying. Women think they can get away with anything by crying. Stupid creatures.
Then someone ran the intercom.
Right on time. Please come in.
Tanya answered cheerfully, causing Dan to ask suspiciously.
A visitor?
Yes, our department head, Nicholas.
Cindy instantly stopped crying.
Nicholas?
I live-streamed our conversation to the company group chat. Then he decided to come over right away. Dan's face drained of color. Understandably so. The department head had acted as the mediator at our wedding. Dan tried to avoid divorce to not disgrace the department head and planned to make me ill so I would return to my parents' house. Ignoring the flustered Dan, Tanya let the department head in. He appeared with an angry expression.
Well, boss.
Dan and Cindy, with strained smiles on their faces, were then addressed by the department head.
Both of you will be transferred to a clerical department starting tomorrow.
No way. I got dragged into this.
And I was about to be promoted to section chief in the spring personnel changes. Will this delay my career?
The department head, with a vein throbbing on his temple and a sharp gaze fixed on Dan.
I had a high regard for your diligent work, but to find out you're this kind of person, I'm disappointed.
Nicholas, it's all her fault. I didn't want a child. She got pregnant on her own.
Dan pleaded with tearful eyes, but the department head gave him a frosty glance.
Rather than thinking about promotion, you should consider yourself a candidate for termination. If the company's performance declines, you too will be the first to be let go. Do your best to avoid that.
After being dismissed, Dan's expression turned to one of despair. The department head turned to face me and apologized sincerely.
I'm sorry for the trouble caused by my subordinates. I will ensure they take full responsibility. Please don't hesitate to speak up if you need me to give a statement.
I should be the one apologizing for the inconvenience caused. I apologized to him in return. Dan and Cindy were slumped on the floor, their heads hanging low. I marveled at their audacity, wondering if they truly believed they could treat me so poorly and continue to live peacefully as before. Their brazenness was astounding. I'm preparing to return to my parents' home with Tanya's help. Dan, send the divorce papers there. I will make claims for alimony and child support through a lawyer. I watched as Dan weakly nodded in acknowledgement. Then I left Cindy's apartment, together with Tanya and the department head. The next day, Dan and Cindy were arrested for assault, but were released a week later on probation due to being first-time offenders. I heard that the two of them broke up shortly after. Despite continuing to work in a sideline position at the company, they resigned after being ostracized due to widespread rumors. Having received the alimony, I am indifferent to what happens to them afterward. While Cindy's whereabouts became unknown, Dan, disowned by his parents, resorted to multiple part-time jobs to get by. Tanya mentioned seeing Dan in the city, looking shabby and nothing like his former self at his previous company. My ex-in-laws, upon learning of the incident, traveled from the countryside to apologize to me. I had always been treated well by them and held no resentment toward them. When my daughter was born recently, I cried tears of joy. So I plan to visit my ex-in-laws with her during holidays like summer vacation and Christmas. If she ever wants to meet her father as she grows up, I'll consider accompanying her under certain conditions to fulfill her wish. Seeing my daughter's innocent smile makes me pity Dan for saying he didn't want such a lovely child. Being a mother is challenging, but I feel deeply fortunate to be her mother. I want to continue watching her grow, surrounded by people who love her.
Hey you. That's not fair.
1 month after giving birth, I returned home from my parents' house. When I got home, I opened the door, and as soon as my husband saw me, he dropped his bag and said that.
Isn't your body shape too different?
Huh? I'm Kathy, 31 years old. I'm a housewife who just gave birth last month. I was looking forward to starting a life with the three of us from today after returning from my parents' house after giving birth. But what welcomed me home was my husband's blatantly heartless words. I was speechless, wondering why he would say such a thing before seeing our baby for the first time. I met my husband, Harry, at work. After graduating from high school, I worked in the accounting department of a company in New York, and Harry was my boss at that time. Our new home, which we bought together, was near the company. But since my parents' house is far from our new home, I went back to my parents' houses a little before my due date. And now, 1 month after giving birth to our daughter, Megan, I have returned. Since Harry was too busy with work to come to my parents' house, this was his first time meeting the baby. And yet, hey, I just came back from a long trip, and that's what you say? At first, I thought he was joking, so I responded lightly. But he was serious.
No, seriously. Haven't you gained like 22 pounds?
Of course I have. It's normal to gain up to 22 pounds for childbirth. It's written in the maternity record. You need to build up strength for childbirth, produce milk, and you'll need the energy for the baby's nighttime crying. It's perfectly normal.
No. This is just astonishing.
Harry didn't say thanks for coming all this way, or you must be tired, or let me see Megan like I had excitedly imagined on the way back home. Instead, he left me with those words, didn't even look at the baby, and retreated to his room, shoulders slumped. What? Just like Harry's bag that he dropped earlier, I was stunned by his attitude and words, and I dropped the diaper I was holding. Well, I thought Harry would be in a better mood after a night's sleep, so I slept in a separate room with Megan that night. However, Harry's behavior the previous night was just the beginning. The next day, the onslaught of fat-shaming comments began. I learned in the hospital's mothering class that nuts are good for producing milk, so I was eating them as a snack when Harry said,
"What are you doing eating nuts? It just drives me nuts. Seeing a fat person eat is disgusting. Pigs eat nuts, right? You enjoy eating what pigs eat, oink oink."
Then Harry continued,
"During your pregnancy, I was holding back, you know? I thought we could do it again once you got back. But this is just impossible. It'd be like a job. At least at work, I'd get paid. But this is unpaid overtime."
Typical accountant. He's now calculating our marital relations as if it's paid labor.
This is a cost-cutting measure. No intimacy to improve operational efficiency, because you're no longer attractive. That's the new policy.
That's all he said. Whenever he opened his mouth, it was only to insult me. I didn't hear any other words from him anymore. Naturally, he didn't help with housework or childcare. But I had Megan. I decided to think of Harry's words as nothing more than a noisy pet in the house. Or so I thought. Then, the event that broke my patience happened. It was the night Harry came home drunk from a year-end party. He sat in a chair in the living room, slumped over the table, and looked at me with just his face. I was sitting next to the chair, nursing Megan.
Hiccup.
With a booze-smelling belch, Harry started mumbling incoherently.
You know, when you think about it, kids aren't that cute. They're bald and reddish black, and they only babble weird words.
What?
Isn't that whole "the baby is cute" thing just something people say because they have to? I'm honest, and as an accountant, I see things as they are.
What?
And you know, seeing you nurse an ugly baby just makes me think. You gained weight to have an ugly baby, and now it's sucking on you, making your boobs sag. This is just too much.
What?
I mean, looking at those saggy boobs, your upper belly and lower belly. You're like a roly-poly bug.
A roly-poly bug?
You only look like a roly-poly bug to me now. Seriously, I can't handle this. Doing it with a roly-poly bug would be like some kind of interspecies wrestling match.
With that, he suddenly grabbed my hand and pushed me and the baby into the back room. Hey, what are you doing? Before I could resist and shout, he shoved me in, closed the door, and said,
Seriously, just stay in your nest, roly-poly bug.
Then I heard him singing the Roly-Poly Trio song as he opened the bathroom door. Unforgivable. It's one thing to insult me, but to say our child isn't cute? Even if he was drunk, this went beyond the realm of being forgiven because he was drunk. I felt murderous rage, but still, I nursed my baby and slept in that dark room. The next morning, when I opened the door, my anger reached its peak. It wasn't the clothes strewn across the floor like a snake shedding its skin after his shower or the cup left out that made my anger boil over. It was when I saw cardboard plates taped to the door of the room where I had been locked and forced to lie down. It said, Roly-Poly Bug's room. The writing was wobbly, likely due to his drunkenness, but it was unmistakably Harry's handwriting and marker. Unforgivable. I stood up. The first step was self-reform. I put the sign Roly-Poly Bug's room on the door of my new bedroom to remind myself whenever I felt discouraged. On the opposite wall, I put up a poster of Janet Jackson. I've always been a fan, and her style and fitness were perfect motivation for me. Thus began my long-term revenge project in the Roly-Poly Bug's room. There were things I could do at home. I moved around on tiptoes. I sat in an invisible chair. I squatted while doing laundry and brushing my teeth. I did crunches after nursing each time. The midwife had said that postpartum fat is softer and easier to lose, and she was right. The weight came off quickly. When my baby got a bit grown, I put her on my belly while doing sit-upas, and she'd giggle as her face came close. She loved being lifted onto my thighs like a seesaw. I focused on childcare and worked hard on my fitness and diet. I quickly regained my pre-pregnancy figure, and since I sweated a lot from exercising, I wore my postpartum tracksuit with just the waistband replaced. There was no need to dress up in front of Harry, who called me a roly-poly bug, and I went makeup-free every day. Harry, who had started calling me, "Hey, roly-poly bug," didn't notice the changes because my clothes hadn't changed. He wasn't looking at me at all anyway. The second phase was husband's deterioration. You've probably heard the strategy of improving yourself while bringing down your rival to widen the gap. I decided to fatten up my husband. Harry's company didn't have a cafeteria, so I sent him to work with high-calorie lunches full of fried meats. At night, I fed him pizza and fried chicken when he came home around 9 p.m. saying, "These are your favorites." Of course, I had dinner with the baby by 6 p.m. I made sure my own meals were 70% vegetables and 30% meat. Eating in small bites helped. I could lower my calorie intake and reduce carbohydrates by using tortillas instead of bread. If I felt hungry, I would endure it for 10 minutes, and the feeling would pass. If I couldn't resist, I'd look at myself and then at a picture of Janet Jackson, which would turn my hunger into guilt and suppress my appetite. Naturally, I knew this alone wouldn't be enough, so I started an Instagram account. Every day, I took a picture of my belly before my bath and posted it with the exercises I did under Kathy at Home Diet. 4 years passed. My daughter started kindergarten. By then, she could talk, which made her cuter, and Harry began to dot on her. However, after all he'd done and said when our daughter was born, I couldn't forgive him. Moreover, the nickname Roly-Poly Bug stuck, which kept my anger burning. When my daughter started kindergarten, I began working part-time at a local fitness club during the hours she was there. I mainly worked the reception and did some cleaning, but being around customers who were highly conscious of fitness and beauty boosted my own sense of beauty. Everyone would say, "Kathy, you're so pretty and have a great figure." This gave me confidence that I was indeed in the beautiful category by popular standards. Well, the time was right. I decided to unleash everything I had built up over the past 4 years on Harry. Tuesday, 1 p.m. at Harry's family's cafe. Harry's parents ran a cafe that served traditional sweets in a tourist area famous for its historic sites. Because it was featured in a guidebook, the shop was busy, and they had asked me to bring our daughter once things settled down. We decided to meet at the shop. Since Tuesday afternoons were less busy, they planned to let a part-timer handle the customers so they could have some time to meet. Harry said he would work in the morning, then take the afternoon off to join us. After sending Harry off to work, I meticulously did my makeup and straightened my hair with an iron. Usually, I tied my hair in a messy ponytail in front of Harry, but now I let it down and styled it into glossy waves. I filled in my eyebrows, which I hadn't done before, and instead of my usual tracksuit, I wore a cherry blossom pink suit. Size 2. I wasn't going to let him call me a roly-poly bug anymore. I deliberately arrived 10 minutes late. Harry had already texted me saying he was inside.
You're late. Is the roly-poly bug slow?
I saw an additional text from Harry at the entrance. Click. I put my phone back in my bag. All right. Watch closely. With my chest out and taking a deep breath, I opened the door with Megan. It was my mother-in-law, Diana, who noticed the door opening and spoke up.
Welcome. Oh my, Kathy. I've been wanting to see you and Megan.
Hello, Diana. I greeted.
Hello. Let's talk in the back. Harry is already here, and Megan is just so adorable.
My mother-in-law was more excited to see her grandchild than to attend to customers, so she handed the tray to a part-timer with glee. As we walked to the back and I saw Harry's back, he turned around, noticing our footsteps, and said,
You're so late. How long are you going to make me wait, roly-poly?
Then, I had never seen someone's eyes widen so much, their nostrils flare, and their mouth drop open in such shock. It was like he was going for the Guinness record for the most open facial orifices. I felt like every pore on his face was wide open as he looked at me. Of course, he said nothing after that. Hello, Harry, I said coldly, on purpose.
Oh, Megan is just so cute. She's a beauty like you, Kathy.
My mother-in-law placed 5 servings of the shop's famous apple pie on a tray and joined us in the room. Can't find your words? Since the silence continued, I decided to speak first.
Oh, well.
Harry mumbled, and then my father-in-law, Thomas, came in.
We've been waiting for you. I couldn't wait to meet Megan.
They crowded around Megan, their faces lighting up with smiles as they cooed over her. In contrast, Harry, with a tense face, said,
Well, she's our child after all.
The showdown began. I immediately retorted, Yes, you're and the roly-poly bug's child. Harry froze, and his parents stopped doting on Megan.
What did you just say?
My mother-in-law asked. I said roly-poly bug. Harry has been calling me that since I gave birth, saying he can't see me as a woman anymore.
Wait a minute. If you were losing weight.
You didn't notice me losing weight. You said you couldn't see me as a woman and shoved me into the back room, didn't you? And you didn't notice the changes either, did you? For these 4 years, you've called me a roly-poly bug without even looking at me, calling me ugly, right? I pulled out the cardboard sign that read Roly-Poly Bug's Room from my bag and placed it on the table. Harry's parents were stunned. Thomas, Diana. I continued. Even this sign alone should show you the emotional abuse. But I've endured this for a long time. And this isn't the only evidence. I took out my phone. Screenshots of Harry calling me roly-poly bug on text message, including the messages he sent just before I arrived. The sheer volume left his parents speechless.
Harry, what on earth?
Harry's father managed to say, while Harry shouted in anger.
Are you kidding me? You're really pulling out evidence.
Then I heard giggling from behind.
No way, is that for real?
2 high school girls at the next table were looking at us and laughing.
Guys like him are always the ones yelling at pretty women. So funny.
Oh my god, he's fat, ugly, and yells. That's like the worst combo ever.
Their laughter and comments were clearly audible at our table. For someone who calls others a roly-poly bug, what about you now? Fat and greasy. I paused for a moment and then spat out. You're like a stink bug. After saying that, I turned to Harry's parents and showed them a photo taken at the hospital right after Megan was born. Look at this. Right after Megan was born, and me. My mother-in-law teared up looking at the photo.
Megan was so tiny, so cute. I'm so grateful she was born into our family.
But after I came back from giving birth, Harry said he couldn't see me as a woman, and eventually called me a roly-poly bug because my breasts sagged after having a baby. He even said Megan, just born, was ugly and red. Harry's parents were at a loss for words. This is enough, right? I pulled out a green paper from my bag. I've shown you evidence of the emotional abuse. I'd like to end this relationship here.
Wait a minute. You're supposed to depend on me, the roly-poly bug. How are you going to live with Megan?
Harry grabbed at me, but I was prepared for this question. I picked up my phone from the table and switched screens. Instagram. Kathy at home diet. I had over 10,000 followers. When I showed this to the manager at the fitness club, he offered me a full-time job. Comments on my posts praised me with things like, "Amazing that you can lose this much weight at home. You're an inspiration to housewives. Kathy, you're beautiful. I admire you."
That's enough.
Suddenly, Harry's mother raised her voice.
Harry, you have no idea how hard it is for a mother during childbirth. It's incredibly tough. Gaining weight is part of building the strength to endure childbirth. Most mothers can't even sleep to protect their baby. And yet, without knowing any of that, you kept calling her a roly-poly bug without understanding anything. I don't know how to apologize to Kathy. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Then she turned to me.
Kathy, I apologize on behalf of my foolish son. Please tell us if there's anything we can do. And please let us continue to see lovely Megan.
That's right. We run this cafe, so Megan won't have any trouble. We'd appreciate it if we could celebrate her birthday and such without Harry.
Harry's father also apologized to me. Thus, I started working as a single mother at the fitness club.
Mom, my friends say you're pretty.
Megan always tells me, and I always reply. Becoming pretty requires effort. It's important to believe in yourself and work hard. I hope you become someone who can work hard too, Megan. As for the stink bug, Harry, according to his mother, he tried to lose weight to get back with me. But he couldn't even stick to a diet, so he remains a stink bug. Now that I'm working full-time at the fitness club, my Instagram followers have surpassed 20,000. I've even been approached by publishers. Even housewives can do it if they try. You have to seize your own happiness. I hope to continue inspiring housewives to strive for their best.